Good evening, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us for the last session of the 2021 Spring Speaker Series. It's been a great time. I've had a great time listening to everyone's story, and we've chosen to highlight the Fairland and Briggs Cheney communities specifically for this series as we begin our community engagement and outreach phase of the planning process. My name, again, is Malene Jackson. I am the co-lead of the Fairland and Briggs Cheney Master Plan, in addition to my esteemed colleague, Philip Estes. But before we begin this last and final session, this last and final conversation that we're going to have, I thought I would just do a quick recap of our first and second event. We're still continuing to keep people first with an acute focus on racial equity and social justice. We kicked this series off with a series of conversations intentionally highlighting the stories of Sarah Lee and Melinda Jackson, plus a wonderful example of youth stewardship in the Fairland community. In the second session, we highlighted the importance of pedestrian safety and more multimodal pedestrian and bike-friendly approach to roads. For example, the Vision Zero and Complete Streets are transportation initiatives that we are deliberate and having meaningful conversations around these two plans. These are tools that we hope to promote racial equity and social justice by providing safe and convenient access to our BRT stations, commercial and retail uses, in addition to residential neighborhoods and parks and open space for sure. We also discussed the importance of having persons with disabilities at the decision-making table, and organizations like Independence Now can help us, can play an invaluable role to helping us to think differently about mobility challenges, like for instance, the location of floater bus stops, which we discussed, identifying inequities that jeopardize the health and safety of our residents. And we aim to keep people first mentality, to keep this people first mentality through the planning process. It is an attempt to be more human and relatable to our community. It's not us versus them, it's us. It's just us. It's more about us doing this work together to ensure that everyone has access to better opportunities. Again, if you were not able to come last Tuesday, and you're interested in the conversations that we had at the first and second session, I highly, highly recommend that you go back and you review them, because these sessions are like really good chapters to a good book. The very beginnings to our conversations as we kick the Fairland and Briggs Cheney Master Plan off. The purpose of today's event is to highlight grassroots movement that has been occurring in the Fairland and Briggs Cheney community specifically. I will provide some context right now as an introduction, and I'd like to move on to the next slide, please. Can we go to the next slide? Thank you so much. I have my colleagues, my fellow colleagues. Thank you, Christina, for helping me. I want to acknowledge you. Welcome again. And again, the title of this session is called Grassroots Advocacy. Grassroots Advocacy on Community Green Space, Mastering the Art of Community Collaboration. Next slide, please. We have an esteemed panel. We unfortunately were not able to have Julian today, but we will continue to talk with him because we've started this conversation, and unfortunately he was having technical difficulties, but that doesn't stop us from using him as a resource as we plan this community together. In addition to the importance of racial equity and social justice in our master planning process, the Thrive Montgomery 2030 plan also emphasizes the need for more connectedness and complete communities. Next slide, please. And the Fairland Briggs Cheney master plan, we just kicked off this plan, and I just wanted to provide a context for the conversation that we're going to have today. But the study area includes Fairland Recreation Park, as well as a diverse community, and has the highest concentration of Black and African American residents. Oh, I see that Julian has joined us, so it's great to have you, Julian, in Montgomery County. Total number of residents is 36,800 residents and 14,000 households. This is not a small community. I think it's a fairly decent sized community. Although the planning staff has been working very hard to engage with the community since September of 2020, which is about nine months, just last month, we got the scope of work approved by the Montgomery County Planning Board. And today we have our esteemed planning commissioner from the planning board, Commissioner Tina Paterson, joining us doing the welcome. And she will also give some opening remarks as well as some closing remarks. And we are really grateful that she has made herself available to this series. So I just want to acknowledge her as well. So the scope of work was approved in April of 2021, and we are narrowly focused on Route 29, Colesville Road, the 3 new BRT walk sheds, putting into context the environmental constraints in the previous goals and visions established in the 1997 Fairland Master Plan. The Fairland Master Plan from 1997 focuses on neighborhoods, transportation networks, public facilities, and environment, emphasizing the potential of additional single-family detached homes while remaining flexible and encouraging a mix of housing types and diversity. The emphasis of the 1997 plan was to develop safe and attractive transportation improvements to enhance the local circulation and multimodal travel. One of the first conversations that I remember having with my planning team, my master planning team, is about the potential and the intentional establishment of connectedness on common grounds, along with the community-led approach on green space. Hence, this discussion, this session about grassroots movements and community collaboration. We cannot do this work alone. We have to do this work together. There are several community green spaces, as you can see by the map, both privately and publicly owned, which indicate a ton of potential to us as planners. For example, Fairland Recreational Park is over 200 acres in on the Montgomery County side, while on the Prince George's County side, it's 39 acres. And this kind of highlights the use of a bi-county park as a regional draw, because this park is utilized by more than just the people of Fairland and the residents of Fairland, but in Prince George's County as well. So we recognize this as an opportunity to bridge gaps between Prince George's County and Montgomery County. And so we will continue to have these conversations internally, as our office is a bi-county planning agency, the only one in the nation, quite frankly. But the residents are our residents, and we all have to kind of come together to resolve these problems together. So on the Montgomery County side, residents have a combination of spaces, but mainly provide space for eating and recreation. And this session, we will explore firsthand accounts of how community green spaces are being utilized in present day history. How is the community using Fairland and Briggs Cheney's local parks? I would like to now transition into introducing our esteemed moderator and to do our welcoming remarks. I'm going to ask that you move on to the next slide as I transition into introducing Commissioner Paterson. I also want to remind you, next slide. I also want to remind you to stay in touch with us. Make sure that you sign up for the e-letter. We have great things in store for this plan, including everyday canvassing, door knocking, engagement efforts. We want to launch a photo contest in the summer of 2021, which is coming up. It's almost here. And I can't believe it's already June, but we have active listening sessions starting in September. So please stay in touch with us. Like most people, Commissioner Paterson began her food. Oh, wait, I'm sorry. Let me back up for a second because I have to give her credentials first. I would like to introduce one of our biggest advocates in the food space. Commissioner Tina Paterson she's just reelected into her second term recently. So we want to also congratulate her on her reelection to the Montgomery County Planning Board. She also in 2019, 2019, Commissioner Paterson was appointed to the Montgomery County Remembrance and Reconciliation Commission, which is no easy work. This is very heavy work that she's doing. She also is an advisor to the Commission's Diversity Council and Information Technology Council. So I want to get into the fun facts, though. That's what I skipped to, because one of her fun facts is that she remembers cooking with her family on her Easy Bake Oven, which I had an Easy Bake Oven too. So I just wanted to acknowledge that I think a lot of people had an Easy Bake Oven, but she recalls having served and worked with her family in the garden, and she loves growing flowers as well. She started her love of food. I'm getting excited here. I'm sorry. Let me slow down. Her love of food has taken her in so many different directions, but she's done everything from cooking classes to launched a food blog to expanding her knowledge and taking wine and spirits education trust. And she's working on a level 3 certification as we speak. And Commissioner Paterson believes that in a world where we are often reminded of how different we are, how different we each are, food is what connects us. And I couldn't agree more. And it is with great pleasure, honor, and privilege that I have to introduce Commissioner Paterson to give us our opening remarks and tell us how the day is going to go, the evening is going to go with our full list of knowledgeable panelists. Commissioner Paterson, are you there?
I am here, and thank you very much for the introduction. And it's good to know that there's someone else out there who's used an Easy Bake Oven in the past. And for those of you who don't know what an Easy Bake Oven is, you can Google it. I don't know if they make them any longer, but it's a pleasure to be here on behalf of the Montgomery County Planning Board, the Maryland National Capital Park and Planning Commission, and the team that has put together the Fairland Briggs Cheney plan. I welcome you, and I encourage you to see this series not as a one-time conversation, but an ongoing dialogue. As we convene tonight and as we talk tonight, I encourage you, for those of you that are participating online, to enter your questions into the chat. And for those of you that participate in the future or hear this in the future, please do reach out to the team. It's vitally important that we know what's important to you, what's of interest to you, and where we can improve. There's always room for improvement in this process. Tonight, I'm pleased to share with you 2 community conversations. The conversations themselves will be approximately 30 minutes in length. I will be posing questions to the esteemed list of panelists, and at the end, the panelists will share closing remarks. You'll also hear some takeaways, some suggestions. Oftentimes, people say, you know, you've got a group of talking heads in front of us, but we want to know, what can we do? How can we be involved? How can we be engaged? But we also need to know, what is it that you really need? As someone who has worked in the past in developing software, it was vitally important to know, what did people really need? It's easy to sit in a room and come up with an idea only to find out that it's not useful, nor is it helpful. And it is our role, both as the planning board and for the staff that's here, as well as for these panelists, to know how we can best serve you. Personally, I think that being of service is the highest thing that one can do, but I know that everyone does not share that opinion. Having said that, I do want to encourage you to participate, be an active participant. You can certainly put, again, your questions in the chat, but you'll also have an opportunity to answer brief survey questions. And I've already talked with the team, and they've told me that they want to follow up. So if you have suggestions, or if you say that we could perform better, we want to know what we can do to be a better service to you. It's my pleasure to share with you, and I know Molly talked about my credentials, me having a food blog, but at the end of the day, access to food and water is a human right. We need food. We need water. And if nothing else, this pandemic has shown us what happens when we don't have access to basic necessities. And I'm pleased to share with you that the panels that are going to be talking tonight are going to be talking about those critical needs, whether it is having access to basic foods. And when I say basic foods, I'm talking about foodstuffs. I'm not talking about caviar and wine. That's wonderful and great. But at the end of the day, what is it that's going to sustain you? What is it that's going to allow you to thrive? And oftentimes when we are in the midst of emergency, whether it's pandemic, illness, unemployment, we have to make choices that oftentimes we would prefer not to make. And I think as we talk tonight, keep in mind that there are those who make a choice every day, whether that choice is to feed their child before they feed themselves, or that they make a choice to put food on the table versus maybe paying a bill. No judgment, but just know that this is about thriving and surviving. So let me get started. Enough of me talking. I want you to hear our experts that we have tonight with us. But before we do that, let me give you a few ground rules or things that we're going to be doing. The sessions are going to be a fishbowl format, which the conversation's going to take priority over presentations. So lessons learned, stories, and insights are going to be prioritized. And I'm going to ask each of the panelists to share what's on their mind, what's a priority, and where we can learn more about what they're doing. I also want to give you the opportunity to ask the panelists questions. So again, I'm saying it 3 times. They say the 3rd time, people will actually take action. So please ask questions. And when the opportunity comes, I'm going to encourage you again to participate in our survey. Our first panel is grassroots and community advocacy. And I am pleased to share with you the names of the individuals. Yes, you saw them on the slide before, but I want to actually share their names with you. And we have with us tonight Agar Mbianda with Mana Food. We have Danielle Alvarado Davis with the East County Health and Human Resources. We have Elijah Wheeler Jr., who's with the Collaboration Council. And we also have with us Julian McElveen with Unity Thunder. And Julian, my apologies in advance if I've mispronounced your name. And please tell me, okay, I see you nodding that I did correctly. This group is going to talk about what it takes to establish a grassroots movement and their experience on managing the critical components of successful community engagement strategy. And if you're thinking that you have to be a director, a program manager to lead community engagement, I'm here to tell you that's not the case. And we'll talk some more about that in the next group. Also, to level set, I've asked each of the panelists in advance if it's okay for me to call them by their first name, and they have indeed said yes, I can. And I would also like to extend to the panelists to please call me by my first name. It's the name that my mother gave me, and it's the name that I invite you to use. So let's start first with our first question, and I'm actually going to ask first if for Danielle. Danielle, please introduce yourself by telling us briefly about your role in relation to strategies, programs, and services that your organization is involved in.
Thank you, Commissioner Paterson, or Tina. It's still so weird saying that. I just wanted to start by thanking everyone for allowing me to be a part of this. This is such a great way to kick off the summer and such a great opportunity to really engage with people. So I do want to thank everyone. So as Tina mentioned, my name is Danielle Alvarado Davis, and I work for DHHS, Department of Health and Human Services, as a program manager for the East County Coordination Kresge Opportunity Ecosystems program. And so these programs are housed in the East County Regional Services Center, so we're right in Berks Cheney, and we connect residents of East County with various resources and ongoing care coordination services as needed. In addition, I also oversee several committees that were initially created under the Opportunity Zone Initiative. These committees include Workforce Development and Education, Health and Wellness Committee, as well as the Parent Youth Engagement Committee. So those are just some of the different programs I'm involved with. And with each one of these programs, we're trying to really get more resident voice and more feedback and really get more engagement going within the area.
Excellent. And thank you very much for that brief introduction. Agar, if you would please introduce yourself and tell us briefly about your role and work in relation to strategies, programs, and services.
Thank you so much, Commissioner Paterson, for this opportunity. Good evening, everyone. My name is Agar Mbianda. I am the Community Engagement Manager for Mana Food Center. My work is mostly focusing on creating new opportunities to deep listening to our community members. I'm also focusing on collaborating and co-creating with organizations that share our vision, and also working to build trust and strong relationship and partnership with community members. We are working for more community engagement and more interactions with community members to fulfill our goal of having a community where all people at all the times have access to sufficient and healthy food. Thank you for having me here today. I'm very excited by the conversation today. Thank you.
Agar, it's wonderful to have you here. We're going to transition next to Julian. Julian, if you would, please introduce yourself by telling us briefly about your role and work in relation to strategies, programs, and services.
Thank you, Commissioner Paterson. I am pleased to be here as well. I am the president for Unity Youth Development Corporation. We are a youth development organization that focuses on sports, that engages kids, and then we use that to reach out to their families and family members and support systems and help them get education resources, academic resources, and community resources in order to further whatever their dreams may be. Currently, we have a number of sports: football, basketball, baseball, soccer, through ECETA, and lacrosse. We also have cheerleading and dance, and we have arts programs, tech programs, and we are just simply trying to engage our youth in a multitude of programs in order to bring them out, bring their families out. We have a lot of fun things planned. And we've also done Zumba nights for families. And I have to tell you, it's great to see all of you here on the panel. And I'm looking forward to the conversations tonight.
Julian, thank you very much for the brief overview. You've piqued my curiosity regarding Zumba. I may have to follow up with you about that. But for now, let's move on to Elijah. Elijah, last in this queue, but certainly not least. Would you please introduce yourself by telling us briefly about your role and work in relation to strategies, programs, and services?
Thank you, Commissioner Paterson. Appreciate being here in the space with you all this evening. I can't follow up anything as impressive as Julian with Zumba, but hopefully the conversation this evening will be really exciting for us all to engage in. I have the pleasure of serving as the Executive Director of the Montgomery County Collaboration Council. We are the local management board here in Montgomery County. We are a quasi-government, quasi-nonprofit entity that basically serves as the local catalyst and a nonpartisan broker of public and private dollars both, whereas we bring together both agencies here in the county as well as other community-based groups to collaborate and invest in order to achieve positive results here in the community. We do that through a number of what we refer to as key drivers. That's through convening of partners, assessment and planning, implementing of solutions, evaluating those investments, and then sharing that knowledge out through the form of technical assistance and incubation. So really looking forward to the conversation this evening and thankful to be here with you all.
Elijah, that is a very strong presentation, and thank you. We're definitely going to dig some more into that, and thank you all for the brief introductions. Having said that, let's take a look at my next question for you, which takes Elijah's theme just a little bit further. We're going to pull that string. Agar, from your perspective, what key principles strengthen or weaken community engagement and collaboration?
Thank you so much for this question, Commissioner Paterson. I would like this evening to share three most important principles for us at Mana Food Center. The first one is respect. And when I'm talking about respect, I'm thinking of honoring cultural diversity in our community in terms of recognizing their differences and their values and how we can empower them to contribute. Talking about respect, I'm also thinking about treating our community members with dignity. That means respecting their right, giving them the freedom of choice, and more importantly, listening to and taking into consideration what they say. The second thing I would like to share is here is service. The second principle is service. Are we just providing our service? And how can we put people in the center of our service. At Manafood, for instance, we call our recipient participant versus client, because we are just not providing a service, but we are building personal relationship with our participant. And we are also building what I can call here a community. So we value them and we give them the opportunity to also add value to the work that we are doing together. I think investing time and energy in listening to our and build respect to our and listening to our community members give us the opportunity to also build that last and trust relationship with them. And the last principle that I want to share is partnership. I think partnership is so crucial for the work that we are doing. At Manafood, we would have never succeeded if we have not collaborated and co-created with community partners and community members. And by collaborating, we have a greater impact in the community and mutually benefit from the work that we are doing together. For instance, we are working with the multicultural community liaisons with who we are co-creating, we are engaging in ongoing conversations with diverse groups in the community, and we are learning a lot from them. And so I think because collaboration is a dynamic process, we should make sure that we are empowering our community in the way that they feel confident and they feel that they're involved in what we are doing. And if at that time they will feel a sense of participation in the work that we are doing together in the community. I will just conclude by saying that when people believe in the process because they are involved, they will also believe in the outcomes. Thank you so much.
Wow, believing in the process and believing in the outcomes. I like that. That's strong. Julian, I'm going to pose the same question to you. And don't worry, Elijah, Danielle, your turn is coming as well. Same question. I'll repeat it, which is, what key principles strengthen or weaken community engagement and collaboration from your perspective?
So what strengthens and weakens collaboration generally, to me, boils down to vision. Oh, can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes, Julian, we can hear you. Please continue.
Okay, great, thank you. What typically strengthens and weakens collaborations are organization and vision. What ends up happening is when you have a vision or a thought of how to strategically align with another organization, what ends up happening, quite honestly, is that there's the thought and the idea, but then there's very little follow through. There's very little organization that happens after the fact. So it's very important that when these ideas are being formed, that it's being put in writing so that as you go along through the process, that you lose any momentum in what you're trying to accomplish as your end goal.
Julian, I didn't want to interrupt. Did you have additional words? They may have been cut off.
Oh, no, I ended there.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Vision. So I like this vision, and we're hearing about confidence, partnership, and participants. Elijah, thinking again about the same question, what key principles strengthen or weaken community engagement and collaboration from your perspective?
So I should say, and I want to surface something that Agar said, and I think that that's listening. Something you said earlier in introduction, Commissioner Paterson was referring to us as experts. While certainly I appreciate that, I think in many cases, folks in leadership are referred to as experts, right? Or they refer to themselves as experts, but perhaps we should do a better job of becoming expert listeners. And so spending more time listening directly to community, I think, is something that really strengthens this work. Really learning how to ensure community capacity allowing for people to play a leadership role in the implementation of our decision-making process is really important. Then learning how to defer to and fostering democratic participation and equity by placing full decision-making in the hands of the actual community that you claim to represent or work on behalf of or serve, I think helps to bridge this divide between community and governance in many cases. As in terms of weakening, I think what typically happens from a system perspective is that we either do one of two things. We either ignore folks within community, meaning that we deny them access to decision-making processes, or we choose to inform them because we think that we know what the relevant information is that they need to know, or that they are actually in many cases already know already themselves. They are actually the subject matter experts when it comes to their community. So certainly treating them as anything other than that, I think really starts to weaken a process. So we have to learn how to reverse that and really change our approach when it comes to engaging with community.
You know, Mr. Wheeler, thank you very much. We are always looking for people to work with us on the planning board. Anytime you're ready, I think you have nailed in a nutshell public engagement, community engagement, what underlies those two areas in particular. I spent the past 4 months involved in a class regarding managing public disputes, and this is at the heart of many of the public disputes, whether it's access to land, access to water, or access to food. And it's that decision-making process and who's at the table. Danielle, I have not forgotten about you. I'm going to pose the same question to you. From your perspective, what key principles strengthen or weaken community engagement and collaboration?
All right. So after all these excellent answers, it kind of makes it hard to give a really concise thing that hasn't already been said. But I will say that I think that the main points have been mentioned, and I think it's important for us to continue stressing them. I think respect is a big part of it. You know, I think for a lot of these groups and a lot of these meetings that we have within the community, it's a lot of agencies and a lot of representatives from agencies and not necessarily the residents that are part of that. And that needs to change. We need to have more resident voice in these decision making, and it's about respecting that. It's about making sure that is a concentrated effort to engage and recruit and make sure that residents are able to amplify their voices and really get into the decision making aspect of some of these bigger decisions that are impacting them, because they are the experts and they are the ones that can speak to that. I think consistency is a big part of it. We have to be consistent. It's just like with any other role that we take on. If you're not consistent, people aren't going to trust you. They're not going to respect the work that you're doing because you're not showing that respect yourself. So I think a big part of it is making sure that we're consistent, that we're sending a clear message, and that we are following through. I think that's a big part of it, is making sure that that's a consistent follow through, so that that relationship can build and that respect and trust continues to build as well.
Danielle, and you thought you didn't have anything else to say. I think you did. Respect, follow through, again, critical. Folks, I have to tell you, I respectfully disagree with Elijah. These folks are experts. They are out here on the front line, and they're sharing the key critical components in terms of principles that strengthen and weaken, and it could be any organization, for-profit, nonprofit, planning boards, and commissions. Let's move on to the next question. And I encourage, again, public, if you're listening and you're watching, if you've got a question, please enter it into the chat and ask these folks. They're here. They want to engage, and I encourage you to engage. My next question is, what new opportunities have come about because of COVID-19? And Julian, I'll start with you with this question.
That's a great question. Thank you. So COVID-19 has brought about probably a change overall to this generation, I would say. No longer are we able to meet at a restaurant or in a building and communicate as we normally do. We're in meetings like this where we have to see each other's heads and try to have a collaboration, through video chat. It's been very difficult, I would say, and the good part about it is that I believe that collaboration has actually grown in the sense of we've probably met and talked more than we did pre-COVID. The other advantage that has come about is the ability to reach out to more people because we have more time to be online and being connected and dialed into folks through a virtual landscape. Whereas before, if you didn't know somebody in person, you weren't connected at all. So I do believe that COVID-19 has had challenges, of course, societally, but in this respect, in the nonprofit world and in what we're doing as far as community, I think people have actually gone out of their way to connect, whereas we would not have previously. Moving forward, I do see now that we've gone through COVID-19 and we've seen some of the advantages of it, I do believe that our work landscape has changed in a way that is both positive and collaborative, as long as we do the things that we've already discussed, which is follow through, making sure that people respect one another, and most importantly, that we get the job done together.
Thank you, Julian. Elijah, I'm going to pose the same question to you. Do you want me to repeat it, or you already remember what I said? I'm happy to repeat it.
Yeah, no, I got it. I appreciate that. You know, what I will say is that I think that we're being a little bit more intentional now. There is an active interrogation of our approaches as in terms of how we engage one another in this moment. I think we're thinking now more so than ever about who and why we're engaging other actors in many cases, who might we want to engage in order to achieve a purpose. One of the things that I believe I said the other night is that we've learned that, you know, old rules don't necessarily apply. We can throw things out of the window really quickly when there's a whole swath of a group of people who are impacted, even disproportionately when we think about COVID's impact on communities of color, in particular, women of color, working women of color, and its impact upon them. So I think that there's an interrogation of the way that we approach the work historically to this point in time, and really thinking about what does it look like moving forward. I will say this specifically because I think it's important to add here, even looking toward or back to what Julian just said about the workplace. There's this interrogation right now of how we overwork people in many cases. Let's not forget that the labor movement actually fought for 4 and 3, 4 days of work and 3 days of weekend. We settled for 5 and 2, right? So I think now in this moment, more so than ever before, we're really rethinking what does productivity look like in comparison to busyness. They are not the same. They are not one and the same. So I'm hoping that the takeaway in this moment for us, especially as we start thinking about the workforce, disproportionately women who have borne the burden of COVID and its impact, is thinking about how do we set up workspaces that are more equitable, especially to women, especially to mothers in this time as we move forward, and make sure that we understand that when you help a group of people who you traditionally have ignored, you're actually helping everyone in this moment.
Elijah, thank you very much. There is in the international community that what you said just reminded me of what we see time and time again. When you support the women in the community, you support the entire community. And oftentimes NGOs, non-governmental organizations, when they go into the community, they actually reach out to the women first, because they know that when they invest in the women, that the return on the investment is oftentimes tenfold, and it's measurable, and it impacts not just that household, it impacts the entire community again. All right, Danielle, I took enough time to give you time to come up with another superstar answer. Thinking again about what new opportunities have come about because of COVID-19. What are your thoughts?
I think that it's given us an opportunity, even in the more virtual realm, so we're able to accelerate some of this ideas that were in place beforehand. I think it kind of forced us to go from in-person to virtual in a really quick way. And that kind of accelerated a lot of things that were already being planned for, and to make it more of an accessible landscape virtually. Of course, that does also come with some inequities within digital literacy and some access with, basic internet access. That still continues to be an ongoing issue, but it also gives us an opportunity to kind of reflect back and kind of look at where are the gaps right now and what are some things that we really need to be addressing, because these conversations have been ongoing, but now we're in the middle of it and we really need to make some decisions and start really implementing clear, focused answers to address those inequities and really strategize smartly. I think that this is an opportunity to kind of innovate and work forward and recognize that we're stronger as a community than as individuals. And I think that this kind of brings that to home as well. You know, this is been a really challenging year and a half now. And I think that it's kind of recognizing that you're not alone. I think that's a big point to keep in mind, and that we are a strong community. And as we work forward into, you know, seeing again what that's going to look like once we're meeting in person again, when we're going to be really meeting in person again, when people are comfortable too. I mean, I think that all kind of impacts into it. But you know, it's a time for innovation. It's a time for acceleration. And I think that, you know, we can only move forward, and you know, and it's great to be a part of these conversations where we're really seeing that this is an ongoing connection between all of us, is that we really do want to support the community moving forward with this.
Excellent. Thank you, Danielle. Agar, do you need me to repeat the question? I'm happy to do so.
I have the questions.
Okay, very good.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah. Thank you so much for this question again. And I just echo what my other colleague said before, because we either all witnessed trauma during this tough time, or through media, through supporting people around us, or directly experience it. But the good thing is that we began the collaboration with the new groups in the community to address the emergency due to the pandemic during that tough time. At Mana Food, we started working with the multicultural community liaisons. And I will just share my personal experience. And I was experiencing with my family all the unemployment that we all witnessed during that tough time. And through one of our multicultural community liaison in Montgomery County, I hear about Mana Food Center, because I didn't know Mana Food before. I didn't know that I can get food from an organization in the community. I didn't know that before, maybe because I was not in need. But during the pandemic, I realized that I can be in need. And I immediately became a participant at Mana Food Center. Then I made the decision to volunteer, to do that volunteer job, especially for my French-speaking community in Montgomery. I started talking to people, talking about the service that Mana is providing to people in need about food assistance. And I found very important the fact that when you are talking to someone who is sharing the same culture with you, and you see that that person is building the trust with you and is open to share what are his needs, it's something that we can say it's very powerful. Honestly, I learned a lot because I didn't know about all these resources in the community. And I realized that even if you are rich, even if you are poor, you can face a situation due to the pandemic. You can face food insecurity. So it was really a time that I learned from the community. I connected with a lot of people. I connected with organizations who are working at the community level. So I think what we should do right now is just to make sure that we think about some of the fundamental values that we learned from that period, to see how we can make the next step normal. Like how do we want to see the next normal? What are some of the value we want to bring in that next normal? So that's what I wanted to share with you today. Thank you.
Agar, first and foremost, thank you for being transparent, and thank you for sharing. I can tell you this. I can relate to the story that you just shared with us. The looking for resources in a time of need can be a challenge. And sometimes it is the difference between 12 hours or an hour that can have us in a place where we feel fortunate to a place where we feel desperate. So thank you for being transparent and thank you for sharing with us. I do want to be transparent with those of you that are watching this program that I have 2 more questions. So again, I'm going to make the plug to submit your questions. I'm hearing from our production team that we may be having some difficulty with the survey, so my apologies. And we are going to have 2 questions instead. And so what I'm going to do now, and panelists, I beg your patience while I tell the group that is watching the 2 questions, because I'm going to repeat them later, but I do want people to think about them. The first question is, do you think the Parks and Planning Department is supporting the needs of your community? And the answers would be that we're looking for yes, no, prefer not to answer. If you have a more detailed response, you can certainly enter that in chat. What I'm going to try to do is aggregate the yes, no, and prefer not to answer responses. But if you have a more detailed response, the team will see it and is certainly happy. And we will talk about follow-up and what happens next. We will have an opportunity for you to share more about how we can improve. Again, follow through, decision making, and listening. Key components again. So I am going to now go to question number 4, which is the penultimate question. And Elijah, I know you've been waiting and I'm ready. So our question, or my question is, how has the Planning and Parks Department provided support to your community organization?
This is the easy one. Well, just having this conversation this evening, I think is really important, because I think it really allows people the opportunity to really reflect upon some of their practices in this moment. When we start talking about the issue of space, what I've seen time and time again, and I'll say this as a dog lover and a dog owner, is that we have no problem going out talking about dog parks and wanting this in our neighborhood and all these kinds of things. What we need to start thinking about is, how do we create space for community, intentionally creating space for community? How do we make sure that we're listening and engaging with community in ways in which we're actually making sure that they are firmly a part of the decision-making process? And I think that having conversations such as this are needed. So certainly the Parks Department has played a big role in, I believe, moving forward, making sure that this conversation and this thought, at the very least, stays at the forefront of our work.
Excellent, thank you. Danielle, same question for you. How has the Planning and Parks Departments provided support to your community organization?
So I think going along with what Elijah was saying, it's something that's always been a part of the work that we do. I think that being a part of this conversation tonight is one way, but I think the other part is with the spaces that we're using, that we've used in the past, is a big part of working with the planning department and just making sure that those spaces are appropriate, they're accessible, and that if we do have any concerns from residents, that we're able to bridge that conversation and get that information to representatives that would be able to address it. So I think they're always in the forefront, more of the behind the scenes supporters. So we do really appreciate that.
Thank you very much. Agar, I know you told me you have the question, so I won't repeat for you, but I'm very curious to hear your answer.
Yeah, thank you for that question. So I think more recently we have been included in events like this, and I'm here today. So we are working together, and also we were part of the Thrive campaign, I think, where we can give input for food access issues, hopefully inform planning decisions. Besides being thought partners, I can't think of any tangible ways. We would love to work more closely with you. Yeah, so that's what I can share about that tonight.
Agar, thank you, and we'd love to have you as a thought partner. So that you've made the offer, and I'm sure we'll be following up. Julian, I'll repeat the question to you because I know that you're actually mobile at this time. So the question is, how has the Planning and Parks Departments provided support to your community organization? I think Julian may be experiencing some technical difficulty. So once we get him back online, we will definitely engage him to hear his answer to this question. All right, so we are drawing near the finish line for this group. Again, for those of you that are participating online, definitely submit questions to this group. We've got a bit of time for Q&A, and also keep in mind the two questions that I shared with you earlier. Sorry, the question that the question I posed to you earlier. I'm happy to repeat it again, but for now, I want to give the panelists an opportunity to talk about this last question and share with you. We're again back with Danielle, and the question is, what call to action do you have for people watching this program now or in the future?
For those that are watching, thank you so much for participating tonight and for being a part of this. I think that's the first step, is just making yourself a part of these conversations, and invite yourself. This is a big part of it, is that we want to hear residents. We want to see people that are impacted by this more at these meetings and really giving their feedback. So it's really, really important. Your voice matters. And I hope that, I know a lot of people say it, but it really does. It makes a big difference. Having a seat at a table, and we really want you guys to be at any of our tables, so thank you. And I think you will be sharing my information, correct, after this, so that if anyone wants to be a part of any of the committees or they're interested in learning any more about our programs, please contact me. Thank you.
Yes, Danielle, we will be happy to share your contact information, and thank you for the offer for us to do so. Agar, I'm going to repeat the question for you because you have told me, and I just want to be able to ask you a question outright. So, Agar, what call to action do you have for people watching this program now or in the future?
Thank you for that question. I would say it starts at the individual level and intersect with the community we serve. So we need to make individual commitment, like just sharing the information that we receive, providing education to people, communicating and being involved in the work that we are doing in the community. So I think if everyone or anyone says, I would like to do this, I will make the commitment to share the information that I receive or the resources that are available in the community to people. They will make a step forward about what we try to do in the community, so everyone can do something for our community. So thank you for coming.
Agar, thank you so much. And Julian, I see you're back with us, so no worries. We have a double header for you.
That question, it's
I think we may have lost Julian again. When he comes back on, we'll go with the double header. For those of you who don't know the baseball terminology, it means I've got two questions for him. Let me move on. Elijah, what call to action do you have for people watching this program now or in the future?
I would say for those who claim or state that they work on behalf of community, but aren't really sure whether or not their work is really impactful and don't know where to start, the first step would be to make sure that you don't stall, right? To make sure that you're taking some sort of step forward into engaging community actively. If you have a moment that you need to pick the moment as being right now. Understand why it's important to engage community. I think that that is really important. If this is a difficult subject for you because you're interrogating how you've kept community out of the conversation, then you need to think about why that's a difficult thing. Do you dislike the confrontation? Do you dislike what you may feel you may hear once a mirror is held up to you when it comes to doing this work? And certainly, last but not least, don't ruminate about worst case scenarios when it comes to engaging community. The most important step is always the first one, which is starting to engage community and making sure that you're bringing them to the table in full partnership in your work and making sure that folks have full decision-making power when it comes to a lot of the work that you're doing. But don't stop. Don't get caught up in analysis paralysis with a lot of this stuff. Make sure that you're starting yesterday because it's important to make sure that you're working in partnership with folks.
Okay, folks, you've heard it. Start now. Release the analysis paralysis. And speaking of things that have been released, I'm pleased to share with you that the survey link is now working. So for those of you that are participating online, the survey link is now available and you can now participate in the survey online. I'm going to check the chat to see if there's any Q&A from people that are watching. I'm not seeing any, but I do want to wait a minute to see if anyone does have a question that they hadn't thought about earlier that they want to ask. But I hope you'll agree with me. This has been a robust conversation. And this is the beginning of a dialogue. The panelists have invited you to not just join their organizations, but to be involved in the community and supporting others. If nothing else, and as far as being Westerners, it's sometimes hard for us to think beyond the individual and think collectively, but we have to. If nothing else, COVID-19 has shown us that we need to think about the collective. It's not always about the individual. I'm looking to check in with my production team to make sure that we're good on the survey. So I'm going to wait one more second on the survey. I think, how are we doing with connecting with Julian? Is Julian not able to participate, or should I rely on interaction with him via chat? I'm looking for a response. All right.
Hello, Commissioner Paterson. This is Malene Jackson. I just want to step in here real quick, just to let you know, Julian is there. He's having technical difficulties, but I can see his face now, so I'm hoping that that's all been cleared up. As far as the chat is concerned, we are having people kind of trickle in their responses. We have 2 responses, I think, on the survey, and 2 responses in the Q&A. And so far, everyone that I've seen respond has been giving an overwhelming yes, that the Parks and Planning Department is in support and supporting the community. So that's all great news. And I would share the survey, but it's quite simple. It's just a pie with all yes, 100% yes in supporting, being supported by Parks and Planning in the community. So I just wanted to chime in there. And if you want, you can move on to the next conversation if you like. I just want to put the caveat there that there will be another question for you to answer in the survey, and we want to encourage you to keep checking back in the survey, because if you haven't had a chance to respond to the first question, then we want to make sure that you respond to the second question.
Thank you, Molly. I do, Julian, if you can hear me, there is a question I would like for you to share with this particular group, and that is, how has the Parks and Planning Department provided support to your community organization?
Thank you very much, and I appreciate your patience. Unity has been around for 16 years, and we have had hit and miss participation with Parks and Planning, if I can be honest. We have not been as engaging on our side of the fence, and that onus comes to us because we started as a football cheerleading organization, and over the years, as the community has needed more from us, we have needed to be more engaged and plugged in with community resources. And because of that, we have been able to coordinate with recreation centers, with the community grant process.
I'm sorry to come back in here, but Julian, I just want to let you know we cannot hear you. I'm gonna ask that we maybe come back to Julian to get him to respond again towards the end. But Commissioner, he's in and out. But I think okay, I think we can't hear him. So I would just say move on to the next series of questions, and then we'll come back and end on Julian so he can kind of have his closing remarks weigh in on this question as well.
Absolutely. I want to thank the first panel. They are not leaving. For those of you that are watching, we are simply going to transition to a second group. And for those of you that want to hear from Julian, just know that Julian is part of the second panel as well. The first group, for the most part, will be with us as we have closing remarks. Mr. Wheeler has informed us that he does have a standing obligation that he has to attend to, and it involves a 5-year-old. So we know that this takes priority. Mr. Wheeler will be sharing with me closing comments that he wants to share. So, Mr. Wheeler, we want to thank you now for your participation. We also want to thank you for keeping your obligations in place with the 5-year-old. I don't know whether it's a young man or a young lady, but in any event, I applaud you for being consistent with your child. All right, let's transition to group number 2. And group number 2, we are going to be talking about building community on green space. And in this segment, we're going to be discussing the potential of what could happen on common ground green space if green space is, quote, the table. Then who feels welcome and comfortable with being at the table? And it is my pleasure to share with you the names of our, again, expert panelists. They may disagree again with me, as we heard earlier, that they're whether or not they're experts. I believe that they are experts. And our panelists include Heather Bruskin with the Montgomery County Food Council, Michelle Nelson with the Montgomery County Parks Community Garden Program, Vanessa Pierre with Homestead Hustle, Healing and Capital Area Food Bank. And also we'll have joining us again, Julian McElveen with Unity Thunder Development. And we're going to, again, round robin questions. And I'd like to start this question, and Julian's already introduced himself, but for this round, I'm going to ask the same question. I'd like you to introduce yourself. And we're going to start with Vanessa. Vanessa, please introduce yourself by telling us briefly about your role and work in relation to strategies, programs, and services.
Thank you, Tina. I'm so happy to be here. It does feel weird saying Tina, and I'm forcing myself, but I am Vanessa Pierre. I am, first and foremost, a resident of the county. I'm a garden coach and educator and a food activist. I kind of like to, that's kind of the cool part about what I do. I am also the founder of Homestead Hustle and Healing. And we're an organization within Montgomery County, and the focus is to decrease food insecurity in the county a little differently through teaching people how to advocate for their homes through gardening education, teaching people how to grow their own food as a means to take back a little bit of self-sufficiency and be able to advocate for their homes to then transition them to be able to advocate for the block is kind of our mindset. We do this in a number of different ways. And it really is just about changing the conversation or the relationship around food and land and farming in minority communities in the county. So we do that with free workshops, and that happens throughout the winter, and it will pick up back again in the fall. Just everything from what is a plant? Literally creating safe spaces for people to ask questions and just to get curious about where food comes from. We also definitely believe that healing our community comes from inside and out. And how we address that inside portion is not only through food, but through having or creating safe spaces for tough conversations regarding race and injustice. And we do that through our Table Talk series. It's a panel series that goes on throughout the winter. We also have a summer growing event challenge coming up. I'm sure y'all, everyone here on the panel is probably tired of me talking about it. It is called MoCo Grows, which is a summer-long challenge to highlight the resiliency of the county and the rise in Victory Gardens, and just teach everyone for free how to grow their own food. And so that has been our biggest event and program thus far. We also do some youth education and just kind of meet people where they are and make it fun. So that is me. Programs in a nutshell. Thanks.
And thank you for that warm introduction. I'm glad you mentioned youth programs. That's how I got hooked into gardening. And I have to admit, I am a flower grower, but I know just as much about vegetables because my mother was the vegetable grower in our household. Before I introduce our next person and ask them to tell us about their thoughts, I do want to let the audience know that there is a survey question as well for this segment, and it is in the chat. Please, I encourage you to participate. We need to hear from you. So my second person on this list to ask this question of is not a stranger to me, and I think you will love to hear her thoughts as much as I do on this next question, and this is Michelle. Michelle, please introduce yourself by telling us briefly about your role, work, in relation to strategies, programs, and services.
All right, good evening, everyone. My name is Michelle Nelson. I'm so happy to be here this evening. And I'm also happy because this area is where I grew up in the county. So I have a direct connection to where change is happening. So I've been the Parks Community Garden Program Manager for about 5 years now. And our program, the main purpose is to provide access to parkland for community residents to participate in recreational gardening, but also to produce local foods, grow vegetables, small fruits, flowers. And we have recently kind of shifted our priorities, or really brought priorities to our program. So our 5 priorities are garden expansion. So looking at different areas in the county where we can expand, and this part of the county is actually a major focus for us. We're looking at accessibility, so how we're reaching community members, but then we're also looking at ADA mandates. We're looking at how can we make gardening more accessible for all communities in the county. We're also looking at reducing food waste. So we've donated food and worked with different stakeholders in the county to kind of engage our gardener community to do more and give back. Education. So Vanessa was talking about the MoCo Grows event, and we're supporting her and partnering with her on that. And then we also had a Foodie Fridays series that Commissioner Paterson was very, very supportive of, which I'm very thankful for. And also Heather, which you'll hear from later, was supportive of. And then stakeholder relationships is our last priority. And that's us coming to events like this and making sure that I'm serving as another voice for some of our actual participants, gardeners, and kind of saying what we need, how we need it, how can we strategize to expand our program to put our gardens in communities that really need it most.
Michelle, thank you so much. The next person may be not known to many of you, but I know Heather from several years ago when the Montgomery County Food Council was just starting, and I was the the pesky food blogger who was talking about food deserts in Montgomery County and why it was important that we had to talk about access to food and what food insecurity looked like. Heather, if you would, please introduce yourself by telling us briefly about your role in relation to strategies, programs, and services.
Yes, thank you so much for the opportunity to be a part of this conversation today. It's such an honor to be alongside these total experts, absolutely not me, but definitely highlighting so many of our incredible partners. And so thank you again for the chance to be here. And I appreciate your connecting back. I will follow your request and say Tina, but the history of our work goes back quite a few years, so thank you for highlighting that. But in addition to being a mom and a county resident and a Girl Scout leader, I also am the executive director of the Montgomery County Food Council. And so we're a nonprofit organization that serves as the primary connection point for businesses, nonprofits, government agencies, and residents around food system issues in our county. So we bring together over 2,000 local and regional partners in community-wide education, advocacy, and capacity building initiatives. And so our work strives to build a more resilient, sustainable, and equitable local food system by enhancing food access for the over 100,000 residents who are at risk for hunger, expanding food education opportunities for all residents, supporting our county's farms and food and beverage entrepreneurs, and also addressing the impact of local food production, distribution, and recycling on our natural resources. So just a couple highlights of how we do that. Since the beginning of the pandemic, we've served as the co-lead to the county's food security task force, coordinating over $23 million in innovative food access strategies, including 5 grant-making programs that funded over $2.8 million in food security initiatives, a farm-to-food bank program that purchases nutritious produce from over 22 local farms, and expansion of SNAP outreach and farmers market benefits, and direct partnership with over 120 food assistance organizations. So though we work in countywide, we have partners closely connected throughout the county, including in Fairland and Briggs Cheney.
Heather, I'm going to ask if you would, because you used an acronym that some that are watching or listening may not know, and you used the word SNAP. Would you please let people know what SNAP is, please?
Yes, thank you for highlighting that. And I take that for granted, and I shouldn't, so I appreciate your noting that. So that's a supplemental nutrition assistance program that's also goes by the name of food stamps. And in Maryland, it is it also goes by the nutrition assistance program. So basically, it provides direct dollars into the pockets of eligible residents to purchase food in grocery stores, farmers markets, and other retail locations.
Thank you so much. Julian, I see that you're back. Did you have additional introduction that you wanted to provide for this segment, or and again we're transitioning to the talking about community and food, and so I'll pause to hear your answer, and welcome back.
Thank you very much. Again, I apologize and thank you for your patience. So in regards to food, I would only have to add in this particular conversation that the gap between achievement is often for our youth is often decided by what happens at home. They come to school and they are not nourished on nutrition at home, and then they come to school with empty stomachs. They come to practice after school and they have not eaten but what the school has provided them. In a lot of cases for us, it's hard for us to find the kids that are actually struggling sometimes, because it's often an embarrassment to admit that you're hungry. And while that sounds crazy to an adult, when we're hungry, we say, hey, I'm hungry. But for our children, it's much, much harder for them to admit that and to actually have enough food, water. They definitely do not hydrate enough. And probably the biggest thing for us as far as a youth development organization is to recognize when a child may be malnourished, and we have to then make sure that we communicate with the families, we communicate with the school and the teachers to ensure that they're being adequately fed throughout the day. So for us, it's very important. So I appreciate you giving me that opportunity to speak.
Thank you very much for sharing those words. We know that when a child is hungry, the ability to focus and perform is severely impacted, and not just the performing, but also growth can be impacted. Let's transition to my second question. And Michelle, we'll start with you. How have you used green space to strengthen and build your network and community?
Yeah, so in our program, green space is incredibly important. Our program would not exist without green space. So our program is really dependent on green space, and it's dependent on community members. This program has been in existence for about 12 years, but in terms of creating a more formalized process of how we identify what green space we're going to actually use, that's really starting to become now the approach that we're going to take to expanding the program. So when I first started in this role, a lot of the work was very internal. A lot of it was divisional support, asking this expert in planning for advice, using this GIS expert to look at the whole county. But now, since I've been here, I've been working in this region for about 5 years. So really bridging the gap with other agencies. And when I first started here, I had to learn the food system in Montgomery County, meeting people, listening to people, because even though I'm from here, I went away to school, things change. But sometimes what I was realizing in sitting in some of these meetings was that things really hadn't changed that much. So just like what Julian just said, I had friends, and I think when you're an adult, it hits different. That maybe this is slang, but it very much so is a different feeling when you may have friends, or when you're starting to look back at your childhood and you're starting to realize, oh, hey, maybe I didn't have breakfast, most days, or maybe I had some feelings of shame or guilt about eating a lunch that I brought from home because everybody was eating the meal that was at school. Or maybe I didn't have anything after I went home, and so I didn't have anything for a while. And when you're an adult, you're going back to visit those things and you're saying, I didn't think that I was poor, quote unquote, or I didn't think that I was struggling. But then you're really revisiting and you're saying, hey, maybe that was my circumstance. And for me, it was, how do I use our program as a way to kind of alleviate some of those issues now? So green space is very, very important. We recently conducted a site suitability study in the county, which looks at parks that are urbanizing in the county. And we basically put in various criteria for what would need to be there for a community garden. So we need access to sunlight, we need access to water, we need parking, all these different things that go into food production. Sometimes they also go into like an athletic field or a soccer field or other priorities, but balancing those things and saying, hey, this is an underutilized field, or maybe this is a underutilized street hockey little area or blacktop, and how can we look at this space and look at land use in the county and kind of revamp it with community input and also with relationships, because we can't make this stuff happen without relationships. And actually, we're looking at different parks. If you go back to the map that was shown earlier, there are different parks that are on that map that are included in our site suitability study. So we just wrapped up doing site visits and kind of figuring out what the next steps are. So, green space is very, very important, and we just need to continue to explore it so that we're not stepping on one another's toes, but still looking at these different issues. Yes, thank you for pulling up this map. So if you look at like Edgewood Neighborhood Park is definitely one that we've discussed, which is very close to Greencastle Boulevard. We've also looked at Fairland Recreational Park, which it's a massive park, so it's possible to fit a small community garden or a large community garden in an area where, in this area, we used information from the county that basically gave us food insecurity statistics. So working with the Food Council again, and Heather, if I'm stealing your thunder, I'm sorry. We kind of use that information to inform where our program is going in the future, which wasn't really a factor when this program started. It was more so opportunistic. It was more so, hey, let's, engage the recreational gardeners. And now it's, let's engage families, let's engage organizations that can teach this information, because we can't do it all.
Well, thank you. I'm going to pose this question next to Julian. How have you used green space to strengthen and build your network and community?
Well, obviously, for a sports organization built around youth, green space is our life. So from that aspect, we have, we've partnered and we've worked literally at all of the fields that are in parks that are on that map. We've had some type of function in every single category along Route 29. So for us, it's been more of a struggle to engage the community, to let them know where we are and what we're doing. And I would say that probably the next step in that evolution is that we coordinate and communicate with our food providers so that we can collaborate and have events that have dual functions. There's no reason that something that happens like a soccer, when you have 200 kids on a soccer field, that we can't also educate the community about food resources right here in our own neighborhoods. And while, they can go to the recreation centers and they can get pamphlets, or they can go online and they can get the information, I would say that there's a general digital gap between where they know those resources are and just being able to come out and support their kids and then find out the information from there. So it's actually, I think, a great way to market use of green space and how we can better use the green space that's available to us if we work together, for sure.
Thank you for that. Heather, I'm going to pose the same question to you. How have you used green space to strengthen, build your network and community?
Yeah, thank you for that question. I love how everybody has very different responses to this question in particular. So I think for me, use of green space really highlights how systems-based approaches are needed for food issues, because green space can be used for so many different purposes of the entire food cycle. So we can talk about food production, educational opportunities, composting, and I appreciate how Michelle already talked about processing food scraps and keeping those nutrients for potentially growing more food, but also how green space brings people together, and looking, I think so often in our county when we talk about green space, the discussion turns to the ag reserve, which is certainly an important resource in our county, but we have so many green spaces throughout our entire county, and need discussions about how we use that land, and certainly tying that to discussions around food sovereignty and access not just to food but to opportunities for food production, and how access to land for food production is also a mental wellness issue. And we hear so often from community partners about how the ability to grow your own food is intrinsic in so many cultures and in so many people's traditions. And so oftentimes when they move to Montgomery County, they don't have that opportunity anymore. And so I guess the other thing I just note is how for the Food Council specifically, we created a gardening subcommittee. And so huge thank you to Michelle, who's one of the co-chairs of that committee. But in in connection to a grant program that we had, formed a subcommittee, and we're just amazed at the number of people and organizations that were already actively engaged in gardening work throughout the county. And I think it just created an opportunity to bring these people and organizations together to create a community of practice, but also to showcase the incredible work that's happening and find ways that we can elevate it and expand it too.
Excellent, Heather. Thank you so much. Vanessa, I've not forgotten about you. I do want to ask you the same question, which is, how have you used green space to strengthen and build your network and community?
I think they might have taken all my things, but I'm going to try and be original here, and kind of just pivot in a different direction. The most logical answer for me to say about green space as a garden educator would be, we need that, to grow food. But we also have to think about the residents that we have here. The folks that need us the most don't often have access to space. There's apartments, there's these high rises. We don't have that space. And a lot of the time, although I do teach gardening, I always come across that, well, I'm a first generation American. My family's Jamaican. I spent most of my childhood in Jamaica, and farming and food, the relationship was different there. So when I come to Montgomery County, especially East County, and see a community of immigrants, I say, if you're not going to feed us, then give us the tools to feed ourselves. And the green space is that tool, that a lot of the resources we need to fix a lot of the food insecurities here are already built into the residents that live here. So that green space is just that missing piece. And so the work that Michelle does and the work that the Food Council does is absolutely pivotal. But also for me, and kind of the way that my organization works with green space is not just about hands in the dirt. I feel like, and I think we all know that food and creating that table, like you said, around food brings people together and allows them to lower their barriers so that it's easier to have tough conversations. Whereas you would want to join this table and say, let's talk about racial injustice and all of these different things. It's easier to just say, can we all agree that everyone deserves to eat? And then we can kind of break down food as that entrance point that's not so volatile, that's not so emotion provoking, to be able to have tough conversations. So definitely green spaces allow outdoor classrooms and spaces to have conversations and talks while we're cultivating the land. And that has always been in our heritage as well, is that conversations happen over food. And ideas come out of cultivation and being together. So I think that, if I could add anything to that conversation, would be, yes, we definitely need it for gardening, and we definitely need it to grow food, but we need it as a space for community, because community allows people to lower their barriers and have real needed conversations for change. So that's all I had.
Well, Vanessa, thank you. And you actually, this is a good tee up for a question that we received from the audience. And I'm going to pose this question to you, Vanessa, then Heather, and then Michelle. And the question that we received from the audience, and thank you, please keep submitting those questions and don't forget about the survey. But the question we received from the audience was, have you seen increased interest in home gardening during the pandemic? And Vanessa, I'll let you weigh in first, and then Heather, I'll follow up with you, and Michelle.
I actually had this as a part of another question, but absolutely, you look at Home Depot on a Saturday. The price of soil. Anytime that people are out there, the price of soil has gone up exponentially this year. That can show you. And we haven't had a rise in this Victory Garden since World War II. Such a rise in Victory Gardens. But I don't want to take my whole answer to the next question, but for sure, the conversation has changed from me being the crazy plant lady to teach me where food comes from. So for sure.
Excellent, thank you. And I'm the crazy plant lady in my neighborhood, so I'm glad to see there's others out there. Heather, have you seen an increase in home gardening during the pandemic?
Oh, absolutely. And I think Vanessa did an amazing job of responding, so I don't have much to add other than, I think the pandemic laid bare so many of the weaknesses in our supply chain, and gardening supplies was not immune to that either. And so seeds and other things were impossible to get last year, which made it difficult for home gardeners, but then also people and organizations that were leading education and access work around gardening. So I think that was a double challenge for our communities. And then I think it continues, and I hope the momentum and energy carries forward to future years. But I think it certainly underscores our need for being able to rely on our own community to produce a lot of our food.
Okay. Michelle, what are your thoughts? Have you seen increased interest in home gardening during the pandemic?
Absolutely. What Vanessa and Heather said is spot on. We normally have a very high retention rate in our program, but last year we had like under 70 plots out of almost 500 to provide to community members. So it's a delicate balance, but COVID really, really required our program to just take a hard look at our offerings and how can we expand more, and why aren't we expanding more? Like, what are our challenges, and how can we help different, like what Vanessa was saying, how can we help different families or different organizations by either helping to provide land access or working through a partnership to kind of say, okay, these systems are not really working well. You do X, you do Y, and you do Z. So, and I can provide this as another agency. How can we kind of come together and create this nice web that everyone's winning? And then we're also helping to improve the county as a whole.
Excellent. Thank you so much. I do want to let the audience know I'm about to round out my questions. So again, if you have Q&A for this panel, please submit your questions. And we also have a survey question for you that the link is in the chat. I do want to let my panelists know I want to be respectful of your time. So I've got a couple of more questions to ask you, so your patience is appreciated. The next question I want to ask about is what new opportunities have come about because of COVID-19, thinking specifically regarding resilience and security, food production, with an emphasis on the East County, since we are talking about the Fairland, Briggs, Cheney area. And Julian, I'd like to start with you.
Sure. I appreciate the opportunity to answer. For us, I believe that the best opportunity that came out of COVID-19 is education, food education to be specific. And in one of the many, I guess, negatives that came out of COVID-19 was the illumination, especially early on, of all of those grab and go lines where there are hundreds of cars, hundreds of people lined up to get food boxes that'll feed them for a few days or a week. And then you have, one box per vehicle. Well, what about the people that could not drive to those locations? What about the delivery of food to different people throughout the community? Oh, and what about the senior citizens? Oh, and what about the people who are disabled? So all of these things started to come out as a result of COVID-19, that while those challenges still existed, I believe that it shined a light on the fact that these are communities that have not been served well, and in a pandemic, even less so. So we had to, those that had to give more, and those who had time and had resources had to do more. And I think in this situation, the education is definitely a big key in this pandemic.
Thank you, Julian. Heather, what are your thoughts regarding new opportunities that have come about because of COVID-19?
Yeah, I think I could talk on this topic for a long time, but I would say just connecting back to the systems focus is something that, when we talk about food, it's so often in the context of other things. It's embedded in other issues, but rarely analyzed kind of independently. And the pandemic has really laid bare so many of the weaknesses, like I was talking about just a minute ago, in our critical infrastructure around how we get food and where it comes from, and our reliance on food from not just, outside our state, but outside our country and outside our continent. And, I think it really also increased awareness of hunger in our communities, just like Julian shared, and about how many residents are not are living on the edge of nutrition insecurity as well. And in an emergency, equity so often is easy to lose as a central lens in an effort to respond really quickly. And I think all of those lessons learned, we're able to now implement and apply to our recovery initiatives that we're putting together. The only other thing I think I'd note, because I know we're short on time, is how with COVID-19, there have been tremendous levels of federal resources that have been able to invest locally. And as we look at resource allocation, we also have an opportunity to prioritize food system initiatives that increase access to financial resources, land, and infrastructure by businesses, farms, and organizations that are owned by people who've been most impacted by structural racism, and really think about how we're applying the assets that we have to move forward as a community and build our resilience long term. And in East County, I think we've also been able to invest in a hub in Kingdom Fellowship and in building spoke partnerships with that hub to really create a two-way flow of communication and resources to build on the expert knowledge of local leaders who know the assets and the challenges and opportunities in their direct community to inform what we're doing at the county level.
Thank you, Heather. Vanessa, what are your thoughts regarding new opportunities that have come about because of COVID-19, thinking about resilience, security, food production, with an emphasis again on the East County?
I know, yeah, I'm going to go quickly. I know we're short on time, but for me, it's more at the two-pronged. So for me, having conversations driving the mission before the pandemic, I was met with a lot of resistance. I remember having a conversation. I spent a lot of time in White Oak Rec Center, probably too much time, but my kids go there. And so I was having a conversation with some of the young people that work there about holding some homesteading classes. And at first it was, what on earth is homesteading? But like, self-sufficient, how canning and doing all of these different things and talking about gardening. And even amongst the young people, young minority people, it was, you're trying to take us back to that place. We are not going back there. Why are you trying to bring us back to the land conversation? And that's what I was met with every time. Because again, like I said, the African-American experience was different from my own Caribbean American experience as it pertains to getting back to land. So I think that I always joke and say I was the crazy pant lady before, but even trying to have these conversations allowed me to say I needed to change the narrative. The pandemic made it very easy for me to do that when all of a sudden the issues that were always swept under the rug, now the whole rug's gone, and the things that we were putting off for later. I mean, it's hard to ignore hungry people when they're wrapped around a building. I think we needed to see that. And for my immigrant folks that are very close and near and dear to my heart, we were taught to suffer in silence. We do not take handouts. We do not accept welfare. Those types of things that were ingrained in us now made it okay because everybody was hurting. So it made it a level playing field and knocked some of us off of our high horses and made some of us very comfortable with asking for help because these community resources have been here this whole time. So I think it was two-pronged. I thought, for my community, it made it easier to have these conversations that says we need to make a change. Don't get too comfortable. And it made our organizations look out and say, we can't put these these injustices off another day. It has to happen now. If food is health, and we see what COVID did to East County disproportionately against all other counties, then there's a problem here that we have to address. So that's kind of my answer to that one.
Thank you, Vanessa. All right. Michelle, same question. What new opportunities have come about because of COVID-19? Again, thinking about resilience, security, food production, with an emphasis on the East County.
I really appreciate the answers that have already been said, because they have covered just many places that I can't hit on. I would, but they've done it. So I really appreciate the panelists. I will say that this is a different approach, but it's really created a new opportunity for leadership, because I think that sometimes as residents, or even just before COVID, we were still challenging some of our leaders in the community, but now it was we have to. What are you going to do? How are you going to make an impact? How are you going to change this? So it was an opportunity that, you know, I think a lot of organizations did rise to the occasion. And then there were some that maybe that wasn't their priority, but it was still part of the entire, you know, kind of, I don't know, what's the word? I think Vanessa said this the other day, but like everything that had been swept under the rug, like everything just came up. So, you know, it was an opportunity for leadership to say, okay, let's air everything out and let's see what changes we can really implement and put in place. And from a recreational standpoint, the community garden program really had a focus on mental health. You know, I can't tell you how many times community gardeners came up to me and said, I'm so happy I had this space, because if I didn't have this space, or if I didn't have parks, it would have been very, very, very challenging to get through this pandemic. And so that was something that is normally kind of semi-adjacent, you know, a catch-all, a nice win, but it was such a high priority, and something that our community gardeners were saying every single time I would see them. Even they're saying it now in this new season. So, you know, all the other things too, like adaptability and creativity, but it really emphasized how food should be augmented and supported more across the board.
Michelle, thank you. I want to be cognizant of the time. We have roughly 15 minutes left, and I did have 2 additional questions. What I'm going to do is ask the panelists to consider the last 2 questions as part of your closing comments. But I also want to acknowledge that we have received from the audience a question, and I think this question would really be best answered by Danielle. And Danielle, the question reads, in what ways can local officials who invite community members to participate in public meetings most effectively demonstrate that the public input received is heard, valued, and considered in their decision making?
So I think the first thought I do want to mention is I think this pandemic, one of the things that has come through is that we can make a lot of our meetings virtual, so it increases accessibility for people. I think that's the first thing that we have to keep in mind. If we're going to have public meetings, they don't have to be in person necessarily. We can open it up so people can access it virtually as well. I think the other part of it too is, the loudest voice might not be the only voice in the audience. It can be really intimidating to speak in front of a crowd of people. Even I was a little intimidated tonight, and I'm in front of a computer screen. So, it can be a little intimidating. So I think that we have to implement different ways for people to be able to share their feedback, not just here, here's open discussion, please everyone just come and give your comments. Having other ways for people to be able to share, whether that be, group activities, whether that be, something written, whether that be, emailing afterwards, whatever they're comfortable with, so that we are able to get that feedback. And also giving credit where credit's due. I think it's a big part of it, is shows that you respect what people are saying and you take them into consideration and mention that they're experts. They are. Residents are the experts in their community, and we have to value that. And saying, by name, you have to respect people by that. So I think that's a big part of it.
Danielle, thank you. I couldn't have said it better myself. The production team had asked me to consider answering. You echoed my sentiments. I firmly believe that public engagement is the cornerstone of public service and responding to the public. But this evening is not about me. If you want to hear about me and talking, come on Thursdays to the planning board session. So let's move on to what we really want to hear about, which is your thoughts. And I want to ask the production team if they would. I know that a few people have responded to the survey. Let's hear what the feedback has been to the survey question. And the survey question that we posed this round was, has this session given you excuse me, let me reread that. Has this session given you ideas and good takeaways that could be used to advocate for your community? And the answers we gave as options were yes, no, and prefer not to answer. And as you can see, we got a pretty good response. The group is small, but we still have responses nevertheless. So when I look at this, we've got 7 answers of yes. I encourage you to engage, to be part of the dialogue. Tonight is not the end of this conversation. It is merely the beginning. I know that according to the script that was given to me, I'm supposed to have closing remarks. I'm not. I'm going to actually cede the floor to the panelists because I would like for them to share with you their closing comments, thoughts, takeaways, call to action that they have for you participants. Having said that, it would be horrible on my part if I did not take this time to give thanks to the production team. We are all here because of the production team. They have patiently worked with us, coached us, guided us, reminded us to turn our cameras on when we didn't want to turn our cameras on, remind us to turn our microphones on when we thought we were talking and we were only talking to ourselves. So I'm actually going to say their names because in our tradition, African-American tradition, saying a name gives power to that name. So I want to thank Shannon Olson, Dominique Neems, Christina Ramirez, Molly Jackson, Philip Estes, Patrick Butler, and Melissa Williams. We would not be here without you, and we thank you. So thank you. Having said that, I am now going to cede the floor to our panelists, and I am going to ask them this question, which is, what closing remarks, comments, takeaways do you have for the people who are watching tonight or should see this in the future? Before I cede the floor, and I am going to start with Vanessa and we'll end with, we'll go Vanessa, Michelle, Julian, Heather, Agar, and then ending with Danielle. And I want to share with you because Julian, Elijah told us that he needed to leave. So I'm going to share with you what he said first, and then I will be quiet. He says, my closing comment is this: any subject-based problem requires a subject-based solution. The best way to solve the issue of lack, bear with me, I'm reading notes now, lack of any community engagement is to increase efforts at increasing community outreach and engagement. It is important to recognize that many communities have a long informed history of mistrust of people outside of their communities coming in to, quote, help, end quote. We must reframe this approach and understand that saying you're, quote, helping, end quote, someone is based in a deficit lens approach. It is better to understand that engaging community requires one to see the community's inherent strengths. Only then will you gain trust needed to effectively partner with those who reside in a community. So as I mentioned, I'm going to stop there. And Vanessa, you have a minute to share your closing comments, thoughts. I want to be respectful of the production team's time and everyone else's time. So Vanessa, when you're done, if you would pass the baton to Michelle, Michelle pass to Julian, Julian pass to Heather, Heather pass to Agar, and Agar, you have the distinct pleasure of handing off to Danielle.
So thank you so much. I will be quick. I wanted to kind of bring two things into focus. For me, I can just navigating this advocacy plane, okay, since the last part of 2019, is that I think it happens two-pronged. It is, for me, garden boots on the ground and heels behind a podium. It has to happen in both places. And even if you can't do both, I think that it's important to feel empowered, people in the community, just in your apartment building, in your church, that you are boots on the ground. And community organizations don't want to feel out of touch, but they may feel out of touch at times, but your information that you provide is invaluable. It doesn't happen without the grassroots movement. It doesn't happen without the picketers. It doesn't happen without the people handing out the food at the food banks, as much as it happens with the delegates, and as much as it happens in boardrooms. And a lot of times they're relying on us as community members to navigate the areas where red tape won't let them navigate. We're kind of the rough and rugged, and there is power in that when it comes to advocacy. They are depending on us as much as we depend on them. And the missions, there's no reason to recreate the wheel. Partnerships are the root of this. I am partnered with 4 people on this call, and I could not have reached the families that I wanted to without engaging partnerships with everybody here to create spaces like this. Nobody knew who I was a while ago until I spoke up and be stern that everything that people need is already in you. Don't think that you don't have a space for change because you have your own lived experience. So I think it's a great thing to be able to first be able to tell your story, empower your story, and share it with the world, because these organizations are counting on us. So that's my closing remarks. Thank you guys for having me. You guys are amazing.
Michelle, we're passing to you.
Okay. I don't know how to follow that. No, honestly, I want to challenge the people who are on this call, the people who may watch in the future, to bring someone in to the fold. So if it doesn't matter if you're a subject matter expert, or if you are really passionate about something that we talked about, or you've never done it before, bring someone into the fold and learn it. It's exciting. There is a lot of red tape, but when you create a partnership or you kind of create a network that works and it's beneficial for everyone involved, it has a very, very strong impact. And that's what we need. We need strong impact to make change.
Okay. Julian?
That's great, thank you. So I guess I would leave with 2 closing remarks. One was actually to Danielle's point earlier. We need to decriminalize gardening with our youth. They are our future. Their experiences are important. And as a youth advocate, I'm a food advocate, I'm an education advocate, I'm a transportation advocate. I am all about trying to build our community, and being on the panel with all of you lovely people has simply illuminated the fact that we need help in multiple areas. The second point that I want to bring out is simply that during the pandemic, I saw some amazing teens, middle school students, young college students do some amazing things from the kindness of their heart, spending a lot of time. Please do not leave out our young people whenever we make plans, and we cannot we cannot move forward if we don't have them involved. And having something like this and engaging them will serve us very well for generations to come, especially in our community where we are trying to build and grow a foundation. Thank you.
I think it's me.
Yes, ma'am, it is.
Okay. Terrific. Thank you so much. So I guess what I would say is we all have a unique role to play in transforming our food system, and advocacy is an opportunity for every person and every organization. I always say that, you know, our elected officials expect to see the Food Council representatives coming and taking specific positions, and it's really upon us as advocates to create opportunities for everybody to have information and the support that they need to be able to engage in those processes, and not just at the county level, though that's incredibly important, but also at the state and the federal levels. And so I just so appreciate community advocates like Vanessa, who's a member of our community advisory board, bringing community expertise to inform policy and program development and implementation, because that's really what's going to be required to make these transformations locally. I'd encourage people to explore your food world with curiosity wherever you have opportunities to do that, and learn about where your food is coming from and what went into growing it. And I think that everyday opportunity for education is something that we all can benefit from to inform policy as it goes, and being resource navigators in our communities, being aware of resources to connect, make those connections wherever we can. And I think just in general, I would highlight how community engagement really requires engaging community voice and expertise, and ensuring that we properly compensate and recognize and honor the time that's invested in that work, and building neighborhood level engagement to make sure that we have those pathways to connect that expertise to policy work, and building on trusted relationships in the organizations that have those relationships, and not just feeling that each organization is going to play every role, but honoring those kind of unique relationships. And I think it's just important for me personally to explicitly say that as a white woman who leads a nonprofit organization, a central part of my role is learning and listening and making a personal and professional commitment to that, and doing the ongoing constant self-work around identifying privileges and that's required to be an effective ally, and prioritizing applying an equity lens in my organizational work and in my personal work, in my community too. So I think that that's just something that I continue to appreciate opportunities to be parts of these conversations, and thank you so much for the chance to just be learning from everybody here today. So thank you. Oh, I'm sorry, and Agar, I am so grateful to Manna Food Center and all your inspiring leadership. So your turn.
Okay, thank you so much. I have two things to share as my closing remark. The first thing is that we learn a lot during the pandemic, and we hear a lot tonight. So I am thinking about how can we apply those values to approach and and challenge the root causes of food insecurity. The second thing is that community members are engaging when they play a meaningful role in the discussion and decision making. So we need to be the facilitator of that process. Thank you so much for having me tonight.
All right. So thank you again for inviting me to this and letting me be a part of this. I feel really, after this, I feel very invigorated and really energized to continue this work. The foundation is there. We know that we're all interested in helping our community and being a part of it, and really working with our community and making sure that they do have a seat at that table. So this is a great way to build upon that, and thank you again.
Excellent. Thank you so much, panelists, for being here. Thank you for your time, your energy, your comments. I've been asked to remind the community, especially our youth, our young people, to get involved with our everyday canvassing and door knocking efforts, and stay in touch with the team that is working on this plan. They want to hear from you. They want to be engaged. And you've heard from every panelist. Please reach out, be engaged, tell others, and don't let fear stop you. face the fear, and do it anyway. And on that note, on behalf of the Montgomery County Planning Department, Montgomery County Planning Board, I want to thank you for being here, sharing your time, your energy, your thoughts with us. We'll see you again very soon.